Life is Strange starts with a lie. It's a statement of intent designed to inform the player what kind of interactive experience they are about to embark on, which seems fairly par for the course the first time you play the game. Choice matters. Your decisions affect the past, present, and future, so it says. Only, it doesn't. Not really. Don't Nod's time-bending teen drama is equal parts quirky, obnoxious, and devastating. It's a game that wears its personality so heavily on its sleeve that I don't blame those of you who bounced off of it. But the bright colour palette and Diablo Cody-esque dialogue mask a game that is packed to the brim with humanity, pathos, and a surprisingly bleak maturity. Your primary method of interaction is conversation. The simple act of talking to people signifies change in the world, or at least attests to this in its user interface. But Life is Strange is remarkable not for the way that choices you make affect the game's overarching narrative, but for the fact they often don't. There's an obvious comparison here. Telltale's narrative oeuvre puts choice at the centre of almost every action you make, with the consequences not necessarily about what happens next, but about how each affected character would react, staging choice as a peripheral action attached at the waist to a defined plot already in motion. And the extent to which player involvement affects the story is something that has divided the community. Some have taken issue with the fact that your actions rarely have meaningful consequence in these games, while others laud this more tightly curated form of player input for keeping a great pace for the story. But really, the debate can be condensed to a dichotomy between what we mean when we talk about choice in games, and what it actually is. Choice, inevitably, is an illusion, at least in interactive media anyway. On a pedantic level, all games involve choice. Regardless of variety, even a presentation of binary inputs is a choice. And some of these options may lead to dead ends, or circle back to the same question, or simply be linearity in disguise, but nonetheless they are a means by which games engender player autonomy, presenting you with information and prompts, and telling you that you need to act in order to progress. But that's not really what we mean when we talk about choice, is it? When we talk about choice, what we're really talking about are decisions. It's not enough to say that a game has choice because of simple variation in inputs, because as an interactive medium, that is the core element that defines what a game is. Decisions are more than just inputs. They are an emotional reaction to the presentation of data, one that can sometimes impair your freedom to act. Decisions reframe choice as points on a moral compass, changing the headline from "What will you pick?" to "What's completely out of the question?" In many of these games there were moments where my ethics trumped my curiosity, often paving the way forward as a mechanical variable, but a moral absolute. The extent of the hesitation to deviate from my own moral compass came from the level of emotional repulsion to the options presented. You can't have selection without context, and especially in the case of narrative-heavy adventure games, it's not the mechanic that draws us in, but the space around it. In most cases, difficult decisions are an entity unto themselves, and really they have little to do with mechanical engagement. Telltale's "They Will Remember This" doesn't affect the main beats of the plot, but it changes the way you interpret these big events. Like it or not, the story train keeps chugging in the same direction regardless of which levers you pulled. Until Dawn's butterfly effect, like its namesake, uses choice as a wingspan for its plot, but still leads players towards the same final showdown at daybreak. It offers the player a chance to decide the fate of the cast, but not the story. Even 80 Days, a remarkable interactive adventure where you can complete the game multiple times and still miss out on half the content, begins and ends on Albion's glorious shores. Life is Strange is no different in this regard. There is variation in the way choice is presented to you. That you effectively get infinite retries in any one given instance is not only acknowledged, but also changes the way choice emerges throughout the story. But even with this, every action you take, every investigation, every conversation, all ultimately boils down to one choice at the end of episode 5. Save Chloe, or stop the end of days. As much as Life is Strange is plagued by this same dissonance that most choice-driven adventure games suffer, its approach to and its acknowledgement of the futility of choice is worth exploring. It knows it's a game. It recognizes the potential ramifications of Max's temporal gift. It limits the reach of these abilities, giving you the freedom to rethink your immediate actions, but forcing you to lock them down in order to progress. You're given the power of a god, only it's held in a very mortal vessel, and it turns out that unlimited do-overs are only as useful as the hands wielding them. And this is most apparent at the end of episode 2, when you are forced into an extremely difficult situation, kicking the chair out from under you, an event where you have to make decisions with no way to reverse the outcome. Kate Marsh's suicide attempt is the horrific culmination of factors, most of which were completely out of your control. But leading up to the episode finale, you are presented with the chance to help her in more believably human ways. There are big gestures, like defending her from overzealous security guard David Madsen, answering the phone to her, or encouraging her to go to the police, but also smaller acts of kindness that you have to actively seek out, like removing a URL or chewing out her tormentors. But even if you did everything you could to help her, if you made the right choices, it could still be all for naught. The wrong choice of words at the decisive moment can still result in Kate jumping to her death. The reality of this sequence is a lot more mechanical than it first appears. You have 6 dialogue choices. If you make the wrong selection twice, words that Kate doesn't like, she jumps. Make the right decisions leading up to this rooftop engagement, and 4 of those prompts become freebies. Regardless of what you choose, your prior actions speak louder. But that still leaves you with 2 chances to mess things up, and the wording of these dialogue options is surprisingly nuanced, making the consequence of your actions that much more imposing. I don't think I've ever seen choice framed in this way. Not as a tool for facilitating change, but as a reaction to environmental pressures. It's not about autonomy, it's quite the opposite. Choice in games is almost always seen as equating to a condensed form of omnipotence on the part of the player. What Life is Strange does in this moment is take that omnipotence away. Just for a moment. But without that power, the impact resonates across the other chapters of the story, even if it doesn't seem like it on paper. Because whether Kate lives or dies, she is effectively removed from the story. One additional sequence aside, visiting her in the hospital, the impact of your choices stand quietly at the sidelines, hidden in text messages and incidental chats with secondary characters, and through environmental storytelling. Whether you talked Kate off the roof or didn't, it wasn't choices you made, but decisions. And even though their impact on the story is in reality quite minimal, their context left a mark on every other action in the game. In my first playthrough, I failed to talk Kate down from the ledge, and I found myself thinking, what could I have done differently? Actually, I found myself thinking that a lot throughout the rest of the game, as I and Max continued to learn that universal truth that time travel is actually quite a bad idea. My mind would often return to that moment on the roof. It stuck with me. Could I have done anything differently? It's fascinatingly backwards that when blessed with time-travelling powers, Max Caulfield seems to have less of an impact on the world around her than when she doesn't. It's almost as if the presence of infinite retries diminishes the value of her actions. And eventually it all rolls back to this idea of decisions being points on a moral compass. In truth, I started a second playthrough primarily to capture footage for this video, and to see the alternate ending, the one where you sacrifice Arcadia Bay. But when it came to that final decision, I found myself hovering over the button, paralysed. I just couldn't go through with it. Not even out of curiosity. And that's a powerful reaction to have to a game that uses the word hella way too much. While Life is Strange holds this conflicted relationship with the player and their actions, it remains an engaging and emotionally draining experience, one that subverts expectations in smaller, less aggressive ways. It's a game that eschewed mechanics in favour of context, story over gameplay, but still manage to integrate the two in ways that make the final product something worth experiencing. Your choices may not impact the story much, but they still matter.
My powers might not last, Chloe.
That's okay. We will. Forever.